Hello, Feisties. I have some great news for you today. Feisty Media is launching a new women's sports podcast called The Feist, which is named after our popular newsletter. So if you don't subscribe to that, make sure you subscribe to it. The Feist podcast will deliver the untold stories of female athletes with a fresh, feisty take. The new show is hosted by me, Sara, and sports journalist Kelly O'Mara, and it will drop every Thursday. It will include interviews with athletes and behind-the-scenes experts, plus the latest news and fun from the world of women's sports. Basically, we curate everything you want to know about the growing women's sports movement, from cycling to running to CrossFit, rugby, basketball, even pickleball. So today, right here, right now, keep listening to hear the first episode that we recorded in front of a live audience from Feisty HQ here in Victoria, Canada. If you love this first episode, which I'm pretty sure you will, be sure to subscribe to the new Feist podcast feed so you don't miss any future episodes. Search for The Feist on your favorite podcast platform and hit the follow or subscribe button. We'll include a link to the new Feist feed in the show notes for you. The Feist, your favorite sports with your feistiest friends. Hello, Feisties, and welcome to the very first episode of The Feist.
Your favorite sports with your feistiest friends. That is, I know everyone wanted to know what our slogan was going to be.
Well, everybody was waiting, obviously, on the edge of their seats with bated breath. What will the new slogan be?
Your favorite sports with your feistiest friends. And that's us.
Yes, that's us. So I'm Sara Gross.
And I'm Kelly O'Mara. And this is the first ever episode. Why do we want to do this, Sara? I mean, besides the fact that we love spending time together.
Well, obviously, I've missed podcasting with you.
Right.
I've been looking forward to this for, I don't know, at least a day or two.
I was going to say, since before I went on maternity leave, let's be real.
Yeah, we have been talking about creating this podcast. So, the women's sports movement is growing rapidly. I think even people who don't pay attention to the sports environment understand that, we've hit an inflection point, in particular with, basketball, soccer, hockey. We see the leagues growing. And for us, I think there's a lot of other sports that are also growing. There's a lot of other sports we want to talk about and cover. So, and I think a lot about how we create fandom. How do we, now that women are playing basketball on TV, you're playing soccer on TV, for those of us who weren't necessarily paying attention to men's basketball or men's soccer, how do we bring those people into the sport? How do we tell stories differently? How do we create a new generation of women fans? And part of that's about storytelling and some of the interviews we'll do. So I think that was a lot in one long sentence, but I feel like that's really why I wanted to do this podcast, is to tell new stories about new sports and different stories about old sports.
And I think you can see it. Obviously, you're saying right now, you can see it in I say the big sports, but they don't have to be bigger. The basketball and soccer and hockey, I guess, here in Canada, though nobody cares about that in the US. But I was telling you, I went to the Valkyries are the new WNBA team in the Bay Area. That's where I live. I've gone to a couple games. But I went to the game where they played Caitlin Clark right before I came out here to visit you.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And I just wanted to see her play. Everyone talks about it. I hadn't seen it in person. And I ended up bringing a friend of mine who knows nothing about basketball. And she was like, oh, she just wanted to see Caitlin Clark too because she'd heard this hype.
Yeah.
And she was like, she's not my friend was saying, Caitlin Clark's she's not crazy better than everyone out there. I thought she was going to be the best, just running circles. And it was oh no, you just know about her because it was finally on TV, because you finally heard about it, because you had all this media coverage. And we need to bring that now to other sports and other players and other people.
Yeah.
And spread the love.
Yeah. So it's growing, but there's still a lot more work to be done, basically, on the media side with women's sports.
I also, so I do have a 4-month-old, and everyone's been buying him, because we're in the Bay Area, everyone's been buying him Giants and 49ers stuff, which is the men's teams there.
What?
Because, that's just, what people, they're oh, Bay Area, Giants. And I finally so I bought him a bunch of onesies from the Valkyries, from the WNBA team.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I love it.
Just because you got to start. This is how you end up with generational fandom, where you're well, I've always watched it since I was a kid with my mom.
100%. Yeah. That's how we're creating, insurances that the next generation of women's sports are going to continue, is because of, all the 8 to 12-year-old, in particular, the research shows 8 to 12-year-old girls who are attending the games, they become fans. They are more likely to play sports, and then more likely to continue watching sports.
So we're going to bring Caitlin Clark hype to running and cycling and CrossFit and pickleball.
Pickleball.
Well, you just
Yes.
were telling me, like...
I know.
huge.
I spoke to a woman who started the first like women-specific media company in
Pickleball.
pickleball, and it grew wildly quickly. So
Apparently, I just found this out, like, the woman who's, like, the best pickleball player in the world is by far, like, the most dominant athlete in any sport. Like, she hasn't lost in a really long time.
Oh, wow.
It's
So
crazy.
they have their own, the Caitlin Clark of pickleball.
Exactly. We can get her on here. We can get her on the podcast.
I'm sure we can.
So what are we going to be covering next week? Episode 2. Mm-hmm. We will be at Western States, which is the oldest 100-mile race anywhere in the world. It's
Oh,
very
really?
old, yeah.
Okay. I've never seen a 100-mile race. Like, despite being an endurance athlete myself and coming from that Ironman background, I still can't quite get my head around running 100 miles. I've never been to one. I'm very excited to watch and talk to all the athletes too.
Yeah, we will be talking to lots of different people next week, both like the pros and also I've been emailing back and forth with like, there's only 83 women or something in the field. It's like a 400-person field. So like a lot of them have just really interesting stories. So I've been emailing with some of, the indigenous runners, some of the older women runners, some of the just like lots of different people.
There's
running.
lots of stories there and really interesting people. So there's 80 women in the field. How many people in total are in the field?
390-ish.
Okay. So a little work to do there.
So we'll be covering that, and then I think we'll be talking. I also went to the new women's rugby league. We'll be talking some of these new leagues. We will be talking about WNBA, the new Canada WNBA team.
Toronto Tempo coming 2026. I'm so excited. I'm a newly minted WNBA super fan.
Okay.
Yeah, basketball's so exciting to watch. I don't think I realized because my like interest in watching sports has increased like 1,000% when I can watch women play sports because I just didn't relate to men's sports that much. So
I just didn't care. It was boring.
Didn't care.
Yeah.
men's sports are boring. But yeah, and so now that like I can watch women play, I'm like, oh my god, basketball is such a fun thing to watch. So I'm very excited to start covering that.
And then we have Tour de France Femmes. So these are like, we're going to be covering lots. I think you were talking about CrossFit games, like lots and lots of things that don't always get covered. So I do feel like there's people out there that are like, well, why? Like, there's so many women's sports podcasts. Why do we need another one?
Right. And there's really not that many. Like,
there's like 4.
Yeah.
To be real.
And the ones that are out there are amazing,
yes.
right? But I think I think that space is just opening up so much. Like, I think we're going to see, and every individual sport is going to start to have podcasts with female hosts and that cover the women's side of the sport. So I think it's just going to continue to grow that way. So like, of course we need like different angles, different takes, feisty take on women's sports.
I do hate the word take. I'm going to say this first episode,
what?
letting people know I hate the word take. This is just my correct and accurate opinion about these hurt situations.
Kelly has a lot of correct and accurate opinions. Anyone who's new here, we occasionally have minor debates about things.
But it's not a take. Just so you know.
It's not a take. It's Kelly's correct opinion.
All right. So what we did do though, first episode, special episode, we are here right now recording together in Victoria, Canada for people in America. And we had a panel last night with a number of guests about what's next in women's sports. So that is our first episode today, which like, we're not going to have a panel every time. So I would like want to preface this with like, there might be some sound issues. Sarah spilled her coffee at one point.
Okay. What?
Or sorry, I spilled your coffee.
Hold on. There you go. Thank you. Also, I spent the AV system. I learned how to become an AV tech yesterday afternoon, right before we set it up because Kelly's flight was delayed. So I'm very proud of myself. But any sound issues, just imagine you had to set that up yourself just right before the event.
You watched a YouTube video?
I watched a YouTube video. What could go wrong? I'm sure it's fine.
So that is what you're hearing today in the first episode. We'll pick up with our panelists, and then next week we will be in Western States, and then tune in from there. Yeah.
Continue listening. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Rate us and leave a review. Whether you love it or hate it, doesn't matter. It really does help us to grow the podcast.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to this first episode, and we will be back. Let me introduce our panelists who joined us to talk about what's next in women's sports. We have first Scott Lake, a new co-owner of the Toronto Tempo, Canada's first WNBA team, and a board member with Canada Basketball. Scott is the co-founder of Shopify and a serial entrepreneur who is a frequent benefactor of girls' and women's sports programs. And up next, we have Hilary Stellingwerff, a two-time Olympian for Canada and multi-time national champion in the 1500 meter. Hilary also came back to the Olympics after giving birth to her son in 2014, and she'll tell us a little bit more about that. She is now the head track and cross-country coach for the University of Victoria. And joining us from over 20 years of coaching field hockey at the provincial, youth, national, and international level is Krista Thompson, a Feisty, P-I-S-E, Women in Sport Coach of the Year, and a Greater Victoria Sports Awards Coach of the Year. She is also a former national field hockey team member. And then last but not least, we have Feisty CEO and founder and a former Ironman champion, Sara, who's going to talk to us about media and what we can learn from being a pro triathlete. We will jump now into the live panel event as our panelists talk to us about what's next in women's sports. So I do want to start you guys with a big question. We're hearing so much about women's sports booming. It's going to be like $2.3 billion next year in revenue or something. What specifically are you most excited about in the next few years? We'll just go down the line for this one because I just want to hear what you all have to say.
I'm most excited about being able to spend my money supporting women athletes. So that the opportunity and the choice to go to a WNBA game or a PWHL game. I went to the Vancouver Rise first game. I'll never forget the feeling in the stadium. So for me, it's about where I invest my money.
Yeah, I'm similarly most excited that there's a pathway for young girls to become professional athletes, similar to what boys have seen for so long. And it's exciting to just see that and get excited about it and feel like there's good momentum coming our way, and that it no longer feels like a complaint to ask for women to be on the same level as men. It's now an expectation, and that's okay.
Don't cross the line. So I like Krista's answer a lot. But my answer is essentially the impact that it's going to have on girls, the impact with the role models that they'll be able to see, the leadership skills, the resilience, the teamwork, all those things that make like strong, powerful women. I feel like just being able to see women do these amazing things, interact with them, watch them, go see them live, meet them, is going to have a massive impact on just their interest in sports and their ability to see where sport can take them.
Yes, to go with what Scott said, since being at ESPNW and thinking about like the next generation of girls who are coming through to be super sports fans and players and everything, like how that's changing our entire culture. Like we know that girls who play sports become women who lead, right? Like we've all heard that. We've all heard the stats about 90-something% of C-suite executives played sports. And just, I'm so excited that there are now pro leagues that boys and girls can go watch women playing. And that is absolutely what is going to change the culture for the next generation and the expectation of what women can do and what women can be. So that's what I'm most excited about.
And so much of this excitement obviously is about these new leagues and investment. So Scott, I want you to tell me, why did it take so long for all this investment to come? And why is it now? I assume this is not a charitable endeavor, and you expect this to be a good investment.
Well, the economics of sports is pretty simple. Basically, you have a good product. That product attracts fans. The fans attract media coverage. That attracts advertisers, and that creates revenue. So that's kind of always been how it's been. Traditionally, women's sports, though, has been underinvested, and men's sports has been overinvested. So I think 2 days ago, the LA Lakers sold for $10 billion, right? The LA Sparks are worth about $85 million. So the viewership in women's sports is going up, and in the WNBA is going up, and the viewership in men's sports is kind of declining. So essentially, there's a greater potential growth in women's sports right now because the audiences are coming, the revenue is coming, the products and advertising is coming. And if you wanna, like for an investor, would I invest in an NBA team? I would love to, but they're just so expensive. Like it just makes no sense. Like where do you go from $10 billion valuation, right? Like, so at the same time, you end up with a product which is basically exactly the same thing, just as exciting. If you've ever been to a WNBA basketball game, it is exciting or more exciting than a pro game and like a men's game. And so the product is actually the same, but you have just so much upside potential. And it's probably the same for hockey and for women's soccer and all this other stuff. So I just feel that in a market driven by, profit, it potentially could be a very profitable industry, and that's why people are actually investing money in it now, which is great. But it all starts with a great product, right? So the product, now that people have realized that the product is great, and you can go watch amazing games and see like exciting sports and all that stuff, the rest just follows. So when I had the opportunity to get in, basically the WNBA has been around for like 15 years, but to get in on Toronto, it was like a no-brainer. But that's not why I actually invested. It was like not for the financial reasons, just because of the social change and the impact of women's sports and all these other great things is really the reason why I did it. But also, yeah, that's great. It's happy, but it wasn't like my driver.
And Sara, one of the things Scott just mentioned, there was obviously more coverage, leads to more sponsors. Talk to us about why women's sports didn't get the coverage that it deserved for so long, and how is that changing now?
You just asked me the biggest question ever. Was this on the run list? I think, why didn't women get... Okay, I think that women's sports was largely held back by old school thinking white males who run legacy media. Like, sorry, that's a... Yeah, like I think that... we even 5 years ago, like I was telling someone this earlier today, like the same even people that I know who 5 years ago might have said to me, well, are you sure women's sports is growing? Like, isn't it a little more boring? Is it really as exciting as men's sports? Like, do you really think that those same people are now, because the tides have turned, are now like, of course we watch women's sports. Like, I love women's sports, like, and it changed really quickly. Like, the culture changed super quick on that. But yeah, I think that, and I think that in that turning, we're going to see continued and ongoing investment. But I think it was like basically a cultural belief system that women's sports wasn't worthy. And we still see like the old school legacy media. That is not what changed. Like what changed in the media environment was everything to do with social media, athletes themselves getting millions of followers, live streaming on different platforms so you could actually watch the women's game if you wanted to go find it. And the fans came out and the fans watched. So, and then they proved, like it was a grassroots thing. Like the fans and the players proved that it was a profitable product. And then it started to grow. And so now people are like, oh yeah, I'll invest in that. I'll watch that. We always watch women's sports, didn't we? Yeah.
And what role do you think Feisty, to that note, like it is the social media, it is the podcast and the email, like so many smaller things that have changed. What role does Feisty play in that?
Yeah, good one. So we're really like, no one's really speaking into that space that's like the intersection between women's sports and women's health very much. Like you see a few like Women's Health magazine or a few things like a few outlets sort of picking up the odd women's sports story or whatever, but like there's a lot of work going on in like women's health, women's performance. I know Hillary was at the female athlete conference with some of my staff with you, and I went a couple years ago, and there's just like a lot of research happening on the health and performance side. And so I think when we bring that together, that affects every woman, right? Like we are going to know more how to get the best out of our bodies in the future. There's so much research happening now that wasn't happening before. So Feisty is really pulling on those threads of like the health and performance piece with the women's sports coverage and also covering other sports, like not just basketball and soccer, but also, cycling, triathlon, running, those things.
It is convenient you mentioned the Female Athlete Conference, because I was going to ask you guys from an athlete and coaching perspective, Krista, Hillary, when you look back on everything we didn't know and that we're now learning more and more research, what's like one thing that you're like, man, I can't believe we didn't know X?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece for me as a coach, and then thinking back to myself as a youth athlete, is the concept of REDS, so relative energy deficiency in sport. And, there was a time where you went to your doctor and said you weren't getting your period, and it was like, no big deal. That's normal. You're an athlete. You're training a lot. Now we're able to understand that that isn't okay, and we can have conversations with these young athletes to say, no, you need to be healthy because you should be, at least in running and endurance sport, peaking in your late 20s and early 30s. And so if you want to get there, there's not shortcuts. You need to go through puberty. You're going to be faster and stronger after puberty. So please be patient through that time. And coaches should be having those conversations with these young women so that they don't feel like they're lost or what's happening. So I think that for me, that I saw so many young girls running really, really fast, and then they would hit a plateau and they would quit because they thought they're not fast anymore. And I always say to our girls, talent doesn't go away. So you just have to be patient through this time. You're going to be faster. The senior athlete records are all faster than the junior records. So just be patient and stick with it, have fun, and hopefully, keep going. So that's, for me, the big one.
I think for me, the big one is the importance of recognizing that you train female athletes different than male athletes when it comes to strength. And also, now with the resources we have, you're able to do individualized programs. So when I played on the national team, you were given a weight training program. We all lifted the same weights. We all did the same exercise. You were given a running program. Everybody did the same intervals. Nothing was individually based. And so I think now we have strength and conditioning coaches. So athletes' training programs are based solely on their abilities, their test scores, and not their peers. Everybody's built a little bit differently. So I think just coming to that realization that one size doesn't fit all.
And you mentioned training girls and female athletes differently in strength. What has changed you've been coaching for a pretty long time. What has changed in terms of what we know about coaching girls and young women?
I think we now have the resources that we didn't have. And when I say that, maybe it's more so the expertise. As a coach, when we first started, you were doing everything. You were doing the on-field stuff, you were doing the strength, you were doing the conditioning. And so you're going based on the knowledge you had with your education, not necessarily probably the best, because that's not your lane or your expertise. And so now we have people with expertise who look after our athletes, which for me is massive.
That makes sense. I said, Hillary, I was going to come back to it, but you came back after having your son, which now is a lot more common, but wasn't common 11 years ago. How did you kind of navigate that gap? And it was 11 years ago, right?
Yeah, he's turning
11
in a week.
Okay. How did you navigate that gap, and how does it feel to see that really, growing now and seeing so many people come back?
Yeah, it's so amazing to see that it's more common now. When I had Teo in 2014, I wanted to come back to trying to compete in the Olympics, and I got injured because there wasn't a lot of research out there on training, so I rushed back and got injured. And the way track and field works is you get carded, so that supports your training, and you can only have one injury card per career, but injury, pregnancy were in the same category. And so because I had used my injury card for pregnancy, I couldn't get the injury card. So I appealed that to Athletics Canada, and they said, no, that's the rules. And then I went further up to SDRCC, which is the Court of Arbitration in Sport, and got a human rights lawyer, and the lawyer favored in my case. So now in Canada, pregnancy is separate from the injury cards. And so and kudos to Athletics Canada for being the first federation to make that happen. But now there's a lot more momentum. Speaking of momentum, I don't know if you guys know Jill Moffitt, but she's done a ton of work to push all the way up to the federal level to make Sport Canada, or to suggest to Sport Canada to push those kind of initiatives and policies so that pregnancy isn't considered an injury, because it's not. And so athletes are supported in Canada similarly as we have, EI insurance and and stuff like that. So that's huge. It's good to see. I think research is coming as well. Conversations are coming, because when I got pregnant, it was, call up Krista Duchesne and Kara Goucher and find out what they did from their pregnancies, because there wasn't a lot out there. Now IOC has a consensus on returning to play from pregnancy, and there's more and more research coming out. So I think that that's huge, just to see that you're not just guessing.
Yeah, they're still guessing a lot, is what I was about to say.
Yeah, they're
what
still
gaps do you
guessing.
still think there are that we need to solve?
Yeah, I mean, there still needs to be research done, and it's just the beginning. We're just starting to get the conversations going. I was at the Female Athlete Conference in Boston, and you could see that there was a lot of interest in the research of female athletes, but it's going to take 10 years till we get the results, because everybody was saying we still have research based on men. We need more research on women. It's good now that it's coming, but yeah, we still need it. And so I think there's a lot of word of mouth. There's a lot of athletes talking to athletes about what did you do and your experiences. But I think that's still valid. That's still important, because what the athletes experience and how they came back from pregnancy is going to dictate what an elite athlete can do, I think. Often what the athletes do is ahead of what the researchers do anyway. Right.
I was going to say, it seems like a lot of the research often is just confirming what everybody already does.
Yeah. But I think if you're going to go into your doctor's office and say, I want to run 50 to 60 kilometers a week or whatever it is, and they say no, well, then you have the research to back it up to say, no, this is okay.
What, from a coaching perspective, Krista, what gaps, because we're talking about the gaps in female athlete research and pregnancy, from what gaps in research would you like to see from a coaching perspective?
I think when you talk about coaching, when you go and you do your master's or your NCCP levels, they always talk about the art and science of coaching, and lots of time and effort is spent on the science part, because there's proof, there's numbers, and there's very little spent on the art of coaching. And when I look at the art of coaching, you look at the connection piece. For girls, if there's no connection, there's nothing. And so I think looking at doing the training social emotional skills, you talk, I guess the buzzword is culture, right? Team culture, how important that is. Well, team culture has nothing to do with the technical, tactical, and science piece. It has absolutely everything to do with the connection piece. And so I think that is a big gap. And it's probably something hard to teach. Leadership, problem solving, it's probably more intuitive, right? So I think that's a big piece, especially with female athletes.
I feel like when I was in high school, it was always oh, you can't coach girls. They're just going to fight with each other. Has the culture changed? That was the thing that was said to me. Do you feel like culture has shifted in youth sports, girls sports?
Yeah, I think an easy analogy would be girls bond to battle and men battle to bond. Right.
Expand.
Well, I think girls have to get along on and off the playing field in order to have success, and men are complete opposite. They'll go out and beat each other up, and then they'll go for a beer afterwards and hold no grudges. I don't think that would ever happen with girls.
Okay, so I do want to talk about when we say women's sports, that's a lot of sports. We're covering up here everything from field hockey to running to basketball. A lot of these new leagues, I was just at a rugby league game last week, right? And the big thing about that is that it's giving people an opportunity to develop as players that they wouldn't get otherwise, right? Is that something that's missing in some of these smaller sports, like field hockey or rugby or volleyball? Volleyball is huge, but the ones that are not, soccer.
You mean in terms of having a league?
In terms of having a league and an opportunity to develop as players.
Yeah, when you look at it, most people wouldn't know that field hockey is the third most popular sport in the world, behind soccer and cricket. Oh, sorry. Behind soccer and cricket. So if you look at fan bases, the field hockey fan base internationally is 2 billion. So you're ahead of ice hockey. The only place that field hockey is referred to as field hockey is in North America. And that's because we have ice hockey that's referred to hockey. Everywhere else, it's just hockey. And so there is leagues in Europe, which our top national players go and play in. I think we're probably a long way in North America based on geography, having a league. So in the US, the majority of players play on the East Coast. In Canada, the largest number of players are on the West Coast. So I think there's been talk amongst former athletes how you could do that. I think we're a little bit a ways away.
What are the, because then I'm thinking about some of these sports that, they don't have a professional league in North America. What are the barriers to getting there?
Probably distance to compete. Like I think similar probably to the Northern Soccer League, there's a lot of travel and travel's expensive. So if you could do something along the West Coast or the East Coast, I think it's probably a little bit more doable. But yeah, need some people who are going to push that and take the lead on that.
This is like, again, it's very hard to talk about basketball, WNBA in the same conversation as NSL. What is the Super League? Super League in Canada. But Scott, going back to like the bigger sports, how do we grow those too? Like we're talking both about, these like, we want to have sustainable salaries for hockey players, for rugby players, but we also want Paige Beckers and Caitlin Clark to make more than $78,000 their first year. How do we make that happen?
So I actually had to look this up because there's some very interesting numbers. It blows my mind how little WNBA players are paid, and so I just did a little research to figure out like how this all works. A year ago, the WNBA and the NBA signed a $76 billion TV deal, and they negotiate together because they negotiate as a unit. Really, the NBA is the controller. Of that $76 billion, the WNBA gets $2 billion. So that's about $200 million a year, which compared to what they had before is 6 times more than what it used to be. But then when you look at how the viewership is working, because this is TV dollars, right? So how the viewership is working is the WNBA viewership is up 170% this year. It's up 48% in attendance, and the NBA viewership is stagnant, right? So over the 11 years, the people watching women's basketball is going to go like this, but they're still going to be getting their $2 billion. The NBA will, get its $74 billion, and they'll split that up. So that's the one thing that is like it's a massive problem. At the same time, NBA players, or the NBA, makes about $11 billion a year. 50% of that goes to players. The WNBA makes about $200 million a year, but only 20% of that goes to players, right? So these are like, I feel like it's the old school infrastructure that's still in place. And so I really feel like the solution to this whole problem is that we get more women's sports executives working all over the league, working in all these leagues, right? Because I feel like they're if we can deconstruct that old school model, you're going to bring opportunity to women. You're going to bring salary parity by percentage revenue as well. But I just don't see it changing on its own. You know what I mean? Like slowly, I feel like it's evolving. But if there were more agents, more executives, more lawyers, all involved in this process, it would be able to push that much faster. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, someone explained this to me at a conference, so bear with me. I'll do my best. But like we're all familiar with like the NCAA, the March Madness basketball, right? So 4 years ago, the women weren't even allowed to use the word March Madness for their tournament, and apparently, and I'm sure this is baked into like what you just said about the NCAA about the NBA WNBA deal, right? It's like this core assumption that the men's game is always going to be funding the women's game has kind of like come through a lot of like, I'm not surprised to hear that, because in the NCAA, the way the funding worked, like I guess in the budget, the women's tournament was like a budget line underneath like all the other stuff with the men's tournament, like in the same, so like nobody realized that the women's tournament was actually making money. Right. And then like a couple of years ago, they were like, oh, wait, the women's tournament's making money. let's promote that more. And like, look what's happened the last couple of years. So like, it just took someone in like the finance department to go, oh wait, this doesn't make sense. But it's just this core assumption, really, right? That like the women's game's not going to make money, but it is, and it will. Yeah.
To be fair, it also took a massive outrage to like make them file the report that showed that. And there were layers. One of the things though in that, and you hear in the current WNBA negotiations, and you hear like in the like at the softball league right now, is that the women should be grateful. Like, well, at least you finally have a league. Like, at least you're getting paid. Like you know. And I'm curious. I want to hear like as from an athlete perspective, Sarah. Like, has that? I know you've gotten in the past. Has that changed over the years? What do you say to people when they're like, well, you should just be happy for what you've got?
Has anyone been watching the like Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders thing? And the second season just came out. Like when in that first season, when those girls are like, we don't make any money, but we're just so happy to be here. And there was this huge outrage about it. And apparently now they're making like 40 times more because of this Netflix special, right? And it's still not a lot of money, right? But so I think that like that's been true of so many things, and like it takes things like exactly that, like a Netflix special and some young woman on TV going, oh, it's fine to make 10 grand because I just love that I was chosen, and everybody getting mad about it to make that change. So yeah, and I've seen that, like I've seen that in my sport. Like I've literally seen where you have women's contracts with sponsors where the women are expected to like show up and at events and be recruiting other women into the sport too. That's a big one in triathlon. Like, what are you doing to increase women's participation? Where the men are just expected to go out and perform, and that's what their contract is based on. So, yeah, there's definitely been, I don't know. I think people have sat, like a lot of the sponsors themselves have like sat back on their laurels and been like, oh, we can get away with this, so we will. And they're running businesses, so of course they do, right? So yeah, we just speak up about it, I guess. It's changing slowly, and it's gonna keep changing.
I was going to ask about sponsorship because I guess like in our sport of triathlon, where I came from, we've even had times where a world champion will say like, oh yeah, the women make less, and everyone's like, no, that's not true. And you're like, no, she knows. She like definitely knows. And so I'm curious, Hillary, like in your experience, because like when we talk about women's sports, so often we're talking about individual sports, right? And so sponsorship is a really big part of running and cycling and triathlon and gymnastics and like all these individual Olympic sports. That's how you make money. How, like, did you know you were making less than the men? How do you go in and say like, no, pay me more?
Yeah, I fired a couple agents. Yeah, it's super frustrating. Track and field is a sport where men and women are at the same competitions, and women are profiled at a very high level, yet they're still not making as much as the men. And so it is extremely frustrating. There has been a big push at the World Athletics level to now equalize pay, not pay in terms of sponsorship, but equalize prize money and the number of events that get prize money to be equal in men and women. So that has come a long way. Even when I was competing, there would be less women's events. The women's events prize money would be much less than the men based on, just having Usain Bolt there, and he had to get more appearance money. So then the rest of it trickled down. So I think it's getting better in our sport, but the contracts are still lower. And there's also even the conversation of, okay, well, you're pregnant and you have this contract. How are you going to make yourself relevant for the year that you aren't going to compete? It's like, I'm freaking having a baby and I'm running still and training and, So there's work to be done there. We've made progress, but I think that the equalization is far, far from what it needs to be and what it should be.
The fact that you just mentioned that there were literally like less events made me think, because the French Open just had the same thing where like women literally play 3 instead of 5. And then they're like, well, we can't put the women in the primetime spot because they're shorter games. And so it's like this institutionalized. So I want to hear like in field hockey and running and triathlon, what is the like institutionalized thing that then becomes, it just like trickles down where you're like, this is just causing problems. I don't know that much about field hockey. That's why I'm curious.
In major events, in World Cup, so now the World Cup for men and women are hosted at the same time, and they just alternate days. And so, but in some World Cups, the women's final will be after the men's. right? Like the gold medal match, right? At the Olympics, the women's match was second and the men's was first. And so they offset, So I don't think because ours is different in tournaments. There's pool play. You have to get out of your pool, and then there's crossovers, and then there's semifinals. So they usually alternate days, men one day, women the next.
And you feel like that's pretty equal and that helps?
Yeah, I don't think there's the fields, they play on there's one primary field, there's a warm-up field and a game pitch, and everybody plays on the game pitch.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that in our sport at the more grassroots level or the university level, we've started to flip men's first, women's races second at like a championship. So every other year it rotates so that the men aren't getting always the final spot. Or, the coaches are, when the men are racing or the women are racing, the coaches are with those athletes. So having it switched each year gets the chance for the athletes to have more time with the coaches. So I think at our lower level we're doing that. At the higher level, I still see that the men are holding the final spots in the competitions. And I think in a coaching realm, I still feel like it's an old boys club, and I go to coaching conferences, and if I have one of my male assistant coaches with me, they're always the first person to, get introduced by another coach to say, oh, what team are you coaching? And it's like, she's the head coach. Oh, right, okay. Like it happened to me last weekend in Portland. My husband had the same shirt as I did, and male coaches walked up to him and introduced themselves and said, oh, are you coaching at Victoria? And bless my husband, it was like, she's the head coach. And then they talk to me, but I have to say I'm an Olympian, and I have to say that, I've coached people to world championships before I get noticed as recognizable head coach, because it was like, oh, how long have you been coaching? A couple years? No, 10. Right? Like, okay, it's not just that I look young, it's that I'm a female head coach of a men's and women's program, and that's not that common still. So,
Krista, I'm curious now, do you experience that as well?
Yeah, you'd experience it at the international level. I've been a head coach at a U17, but just for a test series between us and the Americans. But internationally, there's not very many female coaches. Although in the last Olympics, the gold medal match was 2 female coaches. So, but a very, very small percentage. It is a man's world for sure.
All right, Sarah, sorry, I was handing you the mic to tell us about the institutionalized problems in triathlon.
Oh, good. I mean, in terms of institutionalized sexism in triathlon, first of all, we have a sport that's called Ironman. So that is what it is. And in triathlon, for some reason, this is since I've gotten to the sport, they've held this belief system just in their little ecosystem that like less women deserve to be at the world championships because less women do triathlon, right? And if you talk to any triathlete, most of them will like argue this point. Even women will argue this point. And even when we say like that makes no sense, that's not how you develop women's sports. That's literally not what happens in most sports. Like you don't see like the IOC being like, well, less women participate in sport globally, so we should have less participation. No, they literally do the opposite. And since the 90s have like intentionally been trying to get gender equality at the Olympics because that's what you should do. So we have equal prize money in triathlon. We have a lot of great things. But there's, for some reason, that belief is just hanging on.
All right. Well, we talked a lot. I feel like we've done kind of like a chicken egg conversation here where like you need the coverage to get the sponsors, to get the money, and it goes in these circles. I want to ask all you now, as we're kind of like looking forward, what is the thing that you think we most need moving forward to like make that jump out of this like patriarchy? I couldn't come up with a better word.
Go first? Okay, here's what I think is going to happen. This is my prediction. We know that women are going to be managing and owning like 50% of the wealth in, who knows this stat, in like 10 years from now. Like that's literally what's going to happen. We need women to be making more decisions, to be in more positions of power, and to be making the decisions with the money. And that's literally happening right now. We see it happening. That's why we see the changes. And women are going to invest in the things that are important to us. And I think we're just going to... I am an eternal optimist. Kelly's looking at me right now with her Kelly face. But I think we're going to keep seeing a lot of broad change because of that.
I think it always starts with a good product. So if you have a good product, if you can build an active and supportive fan base, and they don't have to be the same fans who watch men's sports. I think the actual opportunity here is to bring all sorts of other people into sports, so people who weren't sports fans, people who just want to watch women's sports because they like it better. What that does is, I mean, if you're watching any men's sports, here's what you're going to see for the commercials. You're going to see like sports betting. You're going to see pizza places. You're going to see beer, right? Because that's what the audience, that's what people are buying. Like that's what men want to do. If you create an audience that is interested in other types of products, and who have like a pretty high, buying power, just as Sara described, you're going to get different types of sponsors that are going to come to the table that are going to put money into that audience. And so I feel the way that you push through this is you try and make the audiences for women's sports as inclusive as possible. And like you said before, you don't just try and copy what the men did, right? Like how exciting is that? It's not. I feel there's, if you can put an audience that's engaged and supportive and they are different than a men's audience, you will get advertisers wanting to advertise and spend money with that audience. And so that's what I think the transition is going to happen. Just with the Tempo, Sephora is their lead sponsor, right? Like it's not a bank. It's not pizza. You know what I mean? So I feel it's just like what Sara said, like women are going to spend money on things that they want to spend money. So let's give them something good to watch, and let's give them the advertising dollars that'll increase the salaries, that'll, fund the other sports programs that bring up, all other women's sports. That's basically it.
I completely agree from the commercialization and the support. I'll take it from a grassroots, and keeping girls in sports is huge. And it comes down to having female role models, having female coaches that can talk to the girls about their experiences, and encouraging girls to stick it out when maybe not all their friends are doing it, trying to create that community within the sporting world. Even if you have young sons, tell them to invite the girls to play soccer on the fields with them. I tell my young boys are the girls playing with you? No. Did you ask them? Please go ask them, because they are good soccer players. So I think it's just keeping the encouragement up that it's acceptable for boys and girls to play in the same sport, on the same field, together, and that they have coaches and role models who can encourage them to do the same thing.
I think I'll tag on to Hillary's. I think one of the things about visibility and having more opportunities for young athletes to watch, about 5 years ago, CBC GEM, this is from a university perspective, chose to put all national championships on or on their, whether it's on TV or streaming, not just the Vanier Cup and the men's and women's basketball championships. So now CBC GEM put all their national championships online. And for university programs who run youth programs, it's an opportunity for those young girls who you coach once a week to see their heroes or their role models on a screen. So the next time you interact with them at training, they're like, hey, I saw you on TV, even though it was probably a computer screen. But they're so excited, and it's important to keep them involved. And it goes way back to my previous comment about connection. I think keeping young girls in sport, the connection is huge. They're there because they want to have fun, and they're there because they want to play with their friends. And I think as coaches, it's our responsibility to nurture that.
All right, to close this out, this is a women's sports coverage podcast, and we are going to be covering a lot of women's sports this year. What is a sporting event you are most excited about as a fan? Like to watch, like you're pumped?
Pumped? I'd be pumped to see Caitlin Clark play in Las Vegas.
I'm a super track and field fan, so there's a lot of things happening with the Grand Slam Tour and the Diamond Leagues that are being televised, and then even things that are live streaming. The number of people that tune in and pay to watch is going towards prize money, so the fan base is helping to support the athletes that are competing. So I'm excited that stuff is happening and that athletes are getting rewarded for the fan base.
So mine will obviously be basketball, but in 1978, the NBA was like a struggling league, right? There was other competing leagues, the ABA, things like that. And in the NCAA Final Four, there was Magic Johnson, who played for Michigan, and Larry Bird, who played for Indiana. And the rivalry that began in that, in that Final Four game, I think Indiana won, if I remember. Anyway, they both went to the NBA the next year. And that was the beginning of the rebirth of the NBA, which was a decade-long. Winning Time is a great show that just outlines the Lakers, Boston Celtics, who they both went to. Magic went to LA, and Larry Bird went to Boston. And that's really what saved the NBA. It was a league that was was not doing well. But this rivalry was so passionate, and everybody had a side. And you were either a Laker fan or a Celtic fan. And this was when I was probably 13, 14. I went through that whole decade of just watching these. So the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese rivalry that began in university, right? They played against each other twice for the finals. And now in the WNBA is like pure gold when it comes to interesting storylines that are going to attract the attention of millions and millions of people. And, I hope that rivalry just continues for the next 10 years and that it turns into just one of the most interesting periods in women's basketball. Yeah, and there's others. I mean, and that's only in the sport that I'm watching. You know what I mean? Like, that's only in basketball. I hope the same thing happens in hockey. I hope the same thing happens in women's soccer. Like, it's those really interesting stories. Like, there's lots of interesting stuff happening, but I feel like this is like a monumental one.
Okay, a lot of it, I don't get to talk about this very often, but I think the reason I became a professional triathlete is because I couldn't become a professional soccer player. So the launch of the Northern Super League this year and being in that game, that was so, that hit me hard, because little Sara in the next generation is going to have something to aspire to. And then on Wednesday at the ESPNW conference, Isabelle Chevalier, who is one of the co-owners of the Montreal Roses, was talking about how they didn't have a stadium, and so they had to fundraise and build a stadium to play in. And they built it in a way that, by asking the players what they wanted, the fans what they wanted. They built it, it was built by women for women, right? And so they have these really cool things, for example, before the games, they're doing coffee raves, which just sounds amazing to me. As someone in perimenopause who can't really drink anymore, I'm give me a coffee rave any day. Or even the food selections, they have Mexican food, Asian food, salads available. I just want to go to a Montreal Roses game now, And they also talked about the training facilities and how the players themselves got to help design it. So I guess their locker rooms are kind of much closer to where they play and the media area than usual. I guess usually they have to walk miles. And so they created these this spa kind of locker room thing so they could freshen up before they go to the press conference after the game, which also sounded amazing, amazing. And their cleats go in a different room because they stink. Who thought of all these things, right? Or the showers have removable nozzles so they could clean themselves off without getting their hair wet before the interview. So I think I'm excited about Northern Super League and for the next generation of Canadian girls to have those opportunities. Yeah.
All right, I am going to give a shout out for this will be the first episode. This, when people are listening to it, is the first episode of the Feist. Next week's episode 2, we will be covering Western States, the 100-mile, everyone, yes, thank you for the nodding. People know what the historic 100-mile race. And then we'll be covering a ton of other events this year on the Feist. I will say I'm most excited about the last all-women's Ironman World Championship because we're going backwards. But we get to do it one last time, all the women in Hawaii. So that'll be very fun. All right, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, everybody. Subscribe to The Feist. It is on Apple Podcasts. It is on Spotify. It will be on YouTube once we are done here. And thank you, everybody, for coming out. Be sure to get drinks and T-shirts.